All right, welcome to Equal Time Soccer. I am here with pro baller, Minnesotan, Iowa legend, and now practically an Iceland native at this point. You're in your second sit over in Iceland. Hannah Cade. Hannah, welcome to the show.
Hi, thank you so much for having me.
You, Hannah, you are. We were sort of joking before we started. You are like the epitome of how have I never had you on the show before? How have I not heard of you before? You balled out for 4 years at Iowa State, starting just like playing just monster minutes, monster games, like a beast in the midfield. And then this, you're now into your second stint over in Iceland, and I know previously you were at Fram and Reykjavik, and now you're at Tindastal. And I will admit, I'm not sure if you are going back to Reykjavik. I know a lot of the clubs are in that area, but talk about how you heard about this most recent opportunity and sort of how you ended up back in Iceland.
Yeah, so last year I was right in Reykjavik. I had absolutely great time. I played with the club. They were some of the nicest girls I've ever met. Some of just you can just tell they love soccer.
Mm-hmm.
And then my coach, I one of the best coaches I've ever had, and like I loved my experience with him. He decided to go over to the men's side in Norway now, actually. And
Okay.
so he put me in contact with my coach at my current club because he was the one that initially brought him over to Iceland in the first place.
Mm-hmm.
So, based off his word and just trusting him and his coaching, I decided to take a step and move up a level to the
Nice.
top of the first division and then come to this new club with this coach that I heard all great things about.
Nice. So yeah, so Fram was in the second division in Iceland, and so now you're playing in the first. And
Yes.
so even now you have like legitimate Iceland connections that led you to this new club. How did you, way back when you first sort of got connected to the first opportunity, how did you first get connected to Fram and your first pro experience?
So I graduated from Iowa State in 2020, right when COVID hit. So the opportunities at that time were a little bit minimal for players that had not already been overseas. And
Mhm.
so I had an agent at that time and I waited and trained and did everything and would check in. I felt annoying at the time, but just every single couple of weeks I'd just, hey, anything, anything. And
Right.
then finally come around to February of 2021, he he just called me and he said, "How does Iceland sound?" There's a coach that he's known for bringing clubs up to the next division. They bring them in when they want the team to get promoted, and you want to go play for him?
Yeah.
And I really couldn't say no. I was excited.
Well, and so you had that stint over there, and a lot of the times with these overseas opportunities, a lot of the times the contract is for a portion of the season. Like you went over
Mhm.
in the winter and probably, sometimes the season runs the sort of spring fall calendar and you run the whole thing, but other times you're going and they're just paying to bring in internationals for either the Champions League run or the
Yeah.
relegation fight or all these other things. And so for you, what was the experience when you got there, your first pro experience? You'd had this big gap from your college career because of COVID.
Yeah.
What was the vibe when you got there in terms of just getting there and trying to be like, oh, this is what this is? I've never done this before.
Honestly, I had no expectation really going in. And so when I got there, I was just so excited and happy to be there. I was fortunate enough to be brought over for the whole entire season, which was great. So our season ran from um, early May to mid September.
Mm-hmm.
And I just went into training. I had a list of goals that I made for myself going in that I wanted to be able to accomplish. And I was able to do so for the most part. And that was basically it.
Nice. Well, and you talked a little bit about sort of when you left college, the opportunities were down because of COVID. So clearly, you had it in your mind, you wanted to go pro. But when in your college career or even like youth and high school career, did you make that determination? Because I think for a lot of players, it happens at different times. It maybe it happens once you get to like this Power Five D1 and you can compete super well, and you're like, wait, if I can do this, or a lot of players also they get later in their college career and they're like, I can't be done, like I have to keep playing. For you, where was it in your career as a player where you said maybe I could go pro?
Honestly, in high school, I had always been kind of thinking about, hey, like going over to Europe, that would be pretty cool, and having a lot of success and stuff throughout my senior year, especially, and then going into college. Just the whole time, I was like, I'm just gonna go to Europe. Like, I'll play a season, I'll be done, I'll get that experience, check it off the bucket list. But then once I got here, played my first season professionally, I said, oh, wait, like, I can't stop now. I had a moment of clarity, big talk with my mom, and because I would like to go to medical school after this. And so I was like, all right, I'm on a timeline. And my mom just looked at me and told me, she was like, hey, she's like, who says that you have to follow that timeline? Like,
Right.
school's always going to be here. And in that moment, I was like, you're so right. And so that was how I decided to continue. And now I'm like, all right, I'm not going to put a timestamp on when I'm going to be done until my body tells me that maybe it's time.
You're in good company anyway, Hannah. Like Nadia Nadim just had like a great picture on social media where she's like literally wearing her stethoscope and white jacket.
Yep.
There's so many. This is like your story is just like so many players we have on here. So like so unbelievably high achieving. They want to go to PT school. They want to be get some advanced degree. They want to go to medical school. Like all of those things. Just yesterday, Mark did an interview with Christelle, who's going to be a dentist.
Yep.
All of these just like badass women who are just want to do everything. And so you can keep playing, and then maybe you'll just have random like you'll find some online medical school. Who knows? You can find some version.
Maybe everything's online now.
100%. Well, and so now this is your second stint in Iceland. You're practically a local over there. You've had the full experience of being over there for months and months. And for those who haven't seen it, you have your really great, Iceland only Insta account.
Yes.
Where it's just super cool landscape and nature and stuff that we just don't have in Minnesota, like tons of the hot spring stuff, the geologic stuff, the really cool aspects of sort of living in such a unique place like Iceland. So what's it been like as a place to live? I mean, just aside from the soccer, you said part of it is I'm going to go overseas. I'm going to live there, have the experience. Yeah. So for you, what's it been like just as like a resident, like living in this different place?
I have absolutely loved it. It is honestly one of the safest places ever. Like coming from America, that was a huge adjustment because all of a sudden I'm walking down the street, like car doors are just open, the cars are on, no one's doing anything. Like when I came over in the summer last year, the spring and summer, it's daylight 24 hours basically. So like you're walking outside at midnight or practice is finishing up at like 10 p.m. and you feel like it's noon because you're just daylight, right. Sun's right in the air. But it's been so great, and all of the nature that's here. Like you could drive, especially out of Reykjavik, just drive 15 minutes outside and you see a waterfall, or you drive like a couple hours and you're just seeing all of these beautiful things that it's hard to get back home.
Yeah. Well, and so you were in Reykjavik last year. Which part of the country are you in now? Are you still in that general area, or which part of the country are you in?
So I'm about 3 hours north of Reykjavik now. So now I'm really on the water and really up in the mountains, and it's totally different climate than down in Reykjavik, but it's absolutely beautiful. Now I just look out my bedroom window and I see the field on one side and then I see mountains and ocean on the other side, and it's just breathtaking, really.
Yeah. So how big of a town is it? Like what's your town name and how big? Like what's the vibe?
It's called Saterkrókur, and it's the second biggest town in second biggest city in North Iceland, and it has about just under like 3,000 residents, so it's quite small. I'm in a small town now for sure.
Is there a bar? Like, do you have, if you had to have celebration after a huge win, is there like a place to go like get champagne or do something like that?
Oh, there are in fact two. One is very new, yes. Big town.
You could do a hop.
Yeah, exactly.
100%.
Precisely. Walk across the field in the process to get between the two. Yep.
There you go.
A couple of restaurants, a hotel. Yeah.
So I feel like every single picture of you, Hannah, is you look like the sweetest person on the entire face of the earth. So I think you and I probably have slightly different uses for bars. I think you probably, I don't know that you are doing a ton of just like dive bar or hopping. So maybe the new one's a little cuter, and maybe it's the vibe. Be nice.
I always say you got to work hard, play hard, have all the fun.
Okay. Well, now you're throwing down. That's good. And so we joked a little bit before we started that Iceland really, especially the last couple of years, has sort of become like the place where so many Americans or even internationals in general seem to get one of their first professional opportunities. And I don't know if it's that teams are generally a lot more open or more proactive, or the fact that it's, maybe the English speaking side, maybe the fact that it's not that far, the fact that it's kind of cool. Like, I don't know how those factor in for everybody, but it feels like I've seen dozens of player announcements just in the last couple of months where Americans are going over there, either the first or second division. Even Minnesotans like Mimi Iden has gone over there. Annie Williams has gone over there. A couple years ago, Simone Calander, a fellow Lakeviller, right? Are you a Lakeviller?
Yes.
A fellow
I am.
Lakeviller was over there. And so with you, especially your last stint, but even now, are you constantly just running into other Americans? So first, are there other internationals on your squad? But then also, when you play games, are there just sort of always other random Americans where you're like, oh, you played it? Oh, I think we played against each other. Like, does that actually happen?
Yeah, so the transfer window in Iceland is a little bit different than other countries, which is a lot more amenable to the collegiate season in the United States. So I think that plays a big role in like people being able to come here.
Right.
But yeah, especially last year down in Reykjavik, because a lot of clubs are down there throughout all the divisions. So I met so many Americans, and it's funny because you're on the field, you just listen to people talking, and you can like hear like obviously the English, you hear the Americans, and then like after the game, you're like, hey, where are you from? Where'd you go to school?
Right.
And last year, I actually, in one of our preseason games, I met Maggie Smithers, who had played at South Dakota State. Like we were on the field and we were going through like shaking hands or whatever. And I was like, hey, where are you from? And she's like, oh, I went to South Dakota State. And then we just bonded because we're like, oh, we played each other all 4 years of college. Oh, she knew a bunch of my high school teammates that played at South Dakota State. And just, it's a really small world.
Yeah. Maggie,
and everyone just conglomerates really.
So it's like a 200 person group chat over there. You're just like going crazy.
Yeah.
Well, and Hannah, I'm sure you watch every single episode of Equal Time. I'm sure you do. I know you do. And so you know that Maggie Smither is an Equal Time favorite. She's been on a couple of times. She's just an absolute beast, such a shot stopper. Her save percentage for her collegiate career was like literally like 94. Like some just.
Oh yeah, no, we hated playing against her. She saved everything. Would love to play with her, but
it'd be better to have her behind you. Yeah, exactly.
Oh, for sure.
Well, and so, Hannah, you talked about you went in sort of thinking maybe you just play 1 year, and then now you're in your second stint. And also, you went from second division to first. And so you're getting a chance to challenge yourself. I mean, at this point in your career, what are some of your goals in terms of playing professionally? How are you thinking about that?
I try to take it one season at a time and just kind of in the moment, listen to your body, listen to your mind, keep all of that in line, which coming from college, that was hard. And I know I personally struggled with it along with a lot of other collegiate athletes. Like that's a very hard aspect. But here, like just one game, one practice, like right now I'm just trying to play everything like it's going to be my last, because who knows when that's going to be.
Right.
And I would hate to like think that I didn't put it all out there.
Right.
But definitely going forward, I would like to, especially now I don't have my time limit, I would like to keep climbing and get to the highest level that I can get to. Like I think it would be incredible to be able to play like Champions League and go and do all of that kind of stuff, or even come back to the US and play.
Yeah, that is so cool. I love that. Well, I think for a lot of players, if you don't have the right mindset, it can be such a grind. I mean, you're making way below what you should be making as a player. Pay is just not caught up, and so you're not making a lot of money. It's a grind, like you said. Maybe you're living in a new place, which can be cool, but also comes with the stress of like away from family, all those things. And so if you don't have sort of one of the three positive mindsets that are capable of keeping you in it, it can be such a grind. But the truth is, folks like us, like hardcore soccer fans who want to elevate players like you just made my day saying you want to keep playing, you want to keep climbing, because we just desperately want to have players who keep climbing. And that's why, I just continually follow the folks like Molly Fiedler, Annie Williams, like all these people who continue to keep at it, because the opportunities are just getting cooler and cooler. And like you said, there's a chance you could come back and, play back home, or you could play in the Champions League. And so I love that you have those goals. And because it's to just be able to keep playing soccer is just so cool.
It really is. Like it's a job right now, but it doesn't feel like a job. Like I
Right.
feel so fortunate to have gotten these opportunities, and I know a lot of people back home are like, "What? Like I kind of wish I would have pursued that a little bit more." So you just kind of got to take that leap of faith and do it.
Yeah, for sure. Yeah. Well, we'll take a quick break now, Hannah, to just let folks know this week's episode is brought to you by Pentz Homes. You can see it on the scroll below. That's how professional we are, Hannah. You know that. Pentz Homes is a real estate team with Keller Williams. I personally have experience working with Nate and Lydia. They helped us sell our old home and move into a different home that I'm currently standing in right now. So it's an official endorsement. Nate's been a supporter of local soccer for a long time, including as a community owner of Minnesota Aurora FC. We also enjoyed, my wife and I, working with one of their preferred lenders, Angie Shear with Luminant Financing. Her and all the women on her team were just super helpful. So if anyone watching or listening wants to buy a house, sell a house, needs to replace a furnace, do flooring, whatever, go to pentzhomes.com or check them out on Twitter. They're super active. You will get a great response. And so, Hannah, one other thing I was really curious about, because from what I could gather and what I could see about your game, I felt like I got sort of like a two-dimensional picture of who you are on the field, but also a lot of viewers, since we haven't highlighted you before, which is on us, probably don't know a ton about your game or sort of what kind of player you are on the field. So, if some random team was like, "Hey, Hannah, like, why should we bring you over?" If you had to just like actually sell your game, and I have to remind you, this is a humble free zone, so you have to actually brag up and sell your game, because this is an all hype zone. And so, if you had to describe your game, how would you describe sort of the role you like to play and what you do best and all that stuff?
Well, I definitely like playing in the middle of the field for sure.
Uh-huh.
But so I think that having like a polar monitor or one of the tracking devices on at all times would show you everything you needed to know, because I don't really stop running.
Uh-huh.
And a little bit all over doing that. I say hard worker
Uh-huh.
and just like to communicate a lot, try
Mhm.
to connect the team. I like passing, moving, getting the ball back, just creating opportunities and helping calm things down a little bit.
Right.
In the midfield, I love when the ball's on the ground. I'm a
Yeah.
little vertically challenged. Love to do just ticky tack a little bit and give and goes, all of that.
Yeah. And so I think you largely play the six, right? Like sort of either a true holding mid, or maybe you're sort of like you could probably handle playing the eight. You could probably sneak up a little bit, but do you largely play in that holding role?
Um, so growing up, largely in the six, but
Yeah.
then ever since college and now and professionally, usually the 8 or 10
Yeah.
is more where I'll find myself.
Oh, nice. So
Yeah.
did you, when you were playing with Fromm last year, were you largely
Uh-huh.
playing more up the field, like farther up like that?
Yes. So both me and the fellow American I was on prom with, we both played in the midfield and we played a little bit, just
Yeah.
pendulum teeter totter off of each other a little bit.
Uh-huh. And you introduced this, so I will not be the one
Mhm.
bringing this up. You said you're a little vertically challenged. I think you're like five. I'm gonna go with the higher number. I think I've heard
Yeah.
like 5'3".
Yeah.
Let's give you, or
We'll
let's,
go with that.
yeah, we'll go with 5'3". And so, especially for like a holding mid, even growing up playing
Hmm.
at holding mid at 5'3" is probably kind of bonkers. And I know, from the little reading I was able to do that I could find about you, because this was a little while ago of you during the
Hmm.
recruitment. I know plenty of Power Fives were talking to you, the Minnesotas, Wisconsins of the world, but it
Hmm.
seemed like, at least what I saw, what that was implied there is like, oh, maybe she's a little too small to play in central midfield or something. So, was that sort of a recurring conversation you kept having to have? And sort of, is that what drew you to Iowa State? Because they said, listen, you can play. And so we're going to have you play.
Um, that was definitely a big reason, but a lot of the schools that I did talk to,
Mhm.
no one had as much of a problem with it, which I
Right.
was very fortunate
Right.
to have experienced. And then I thought that in that whole process, just the more games that those coaches had watched,
Mm-hmm.
the more that they learned, like, hey, maybe this is okay.
Right.
And that, like, listen, you don't have to be the biggest, the tallest to
Right.
be able to play in that position, in that formation. And so it
Right.
wasn't as much of a struggle as I initially thought it was going to be. I think
Uh-huh.
coming over professionally, that it turned into a little bit more of that.
Uh-huh.
that being said, everything was through my agent, and so no one, like the coaches don't directly come and talk
Right.
to me about it.
Right.
So
So
yeah,
you had a little bit of insulation from it. If they kept bitching about it, you didn't have to hear about it.
exactly.
Well, and so when you went over there,
Mhm.
especially because you got used to playing at Iowa State, and I haven't watched a ton of Iowa State, but I do generally know the Big 12 is sort of known
Yeah,
to be, you know, even more bruising than the Big 10, and I think the Big 10 is
yeah.
being bruising, and so you go from being a small player, but one who's playing in sort of
Mhm.
an absurdly physical like conference, and then now you're over playing pro. What were some of those big changes you had to make, or some the biggest things you had to adapt to, sort of going from the Big 12, which is maybe the most stereotypical American,
Yeah.
to then going and playing in a European professional setting?
Honestly, it was kind of a welcome relief. My
Yeah,
body didn't absolutely hurt after every single game. There were
yeah,
some big hits that are put in the Big 12 for sure, but it was really nice to come over here and be able to, like, they play a very specific style of soccer. They keep the ball on the ground, they pass it around, they keep possession, they have technical abilities. It's soccer, it's very pretty style of soccer no matter what level you're at. There's not as much boot ball as the Big
right,
12 does get a little bit boot ball as well as the Big 10. But
yeah,
I think that we're transitioning into trying to keep possession in those for sure.
hmm
But here it's all about possession. You're not putting in these absolutely huge, massive hits on people and getting praise for that. You're
right,
trying to play soccer.
right. You're trying to like play soccer. Yeah, I
Yeah.
usually, the way I describe it to someone if they don't watch college soccer specifically,
Mhm.
like women's D1 college soccer is what I see the most of, is like probably a third of all like D1 women's soccer programs are either playing straight up like actually actively fouling you almost every minute of every game, or
Mhm.
like they're only parking the bus, or like it's
Yep.
just when you play Nebraska, this is what you're
Yep.
going to get. Like when you play when you play Omaha, like this is what you're going to get. Like when the Gophers played Drake, it
Mhm.
was just like you're going to be getting fouled. You are going to
Yep.
be getting hit. It is. And so it's kind of like, as you watch it, it's almost visually sometimes frustrating of like, I just want to
Yes.
passing. I just want to see move.
Yep.
And so when you got over there, did
Mhm.
folks did the Icelandic players or the non-American players sort of have an idea, like a stereotype that they thought you would fulfill for them? Like, did they expect you to be a certain way, or did you, being sort of a slighter, shorter player and not some bruising 5'10" holding mid, did they not project that onto you, or did they put some American stereotypes on you?
I think they put maybe a little bit, but not too awful much. And I mean, my situation was a little bit different because, again, the other American that was brought over with me, we were the same stature, same body type. Like
Right.
we looked similar. Like there wasn't anything necessarily physically intimidating about us. But then when we got on the field, it was totally different. We
Uh-huh.
were both putting in hits that we would put in American college, and people were flying, and we're like, oh, whoa, we've not been able to do this before and have that kind of success on it.
Right.
But
You're like,
yeah, so
oh, I'm the rugged one here.
yeah. I'm like, look, I'm 5'10. I'm doing great.
You're like, oh my god, I'm literally Julie Ertz in this league. I'm
Yeah,
bossing people.
for sure. But it's okay. That was my always my favorite compliment is people were always like, oh, I didn't realize you were as short as you were. Like you don't play like that. You don't look like that. You don't carry yourself that way. So
Like that's happened to me for sure. When you watch from like the
mhm.
top of a stadium, if you watch a game, you
Yep.
sort of project people's size based on how they play the game. So even if someone's
Yep.
tall, if they don't really use their frame, you
Yeah.
think of them as sort of like wispy and small, because they're not using, they're not protecting the ball, they're not sort of holding people off. But if you're
Right.
small and you play big, it's the inverse for sure. Well,
Yep.
and aside from soccer, you go over there, I'm sure there's plenty of, Americans that these Icelandic players have met or these coaches have met, but
Mhm.
what are some of the funniest or strangest or most random conversations you had to have where they're like asking you about America or asking you about Iowa or some random thing like that?
Oh, the distances in America really get to people here because you can basically around the whole country. I think when we looked it up last year, it's like basically the size of Kentucky.
Uh-huh.
It's what like the country just square footage wise is. And so there, I had some teammates that their significant other was going over to school right outside Chicago. And she was like, "Oh, I'm looking at a au pair job in Kansas City." She was like, "So I'll be in America." And I was like, we gotta look at her. We're like, "That's really not that close. Like, you gotta make sure you have a car if you're doing that. You're still about eight or so hours away." Like, we would have to pull up maps for people and draw out about how far like California and New York were,
Right.
and just all of these things that just was. I mean, you're not from America, so we take it for granted that we know that those places are a good distance. You can't just drive 15 minutes and be there.
Right. Right. And on the flip side, you grew up in Minnesota, you go to
Mhm.
college in Iowa, which to any other person in the rest of the world is the same place. Like it's the
Yeah,
same,
exactly.
and probably rightfully is basically the same vibe. And so for you, what are some flip side things where you go over there and it's just sort of like either a fun or an interesting or some random thing where you're like, "Oh, sure, I guess it is different."
Just even culturally here, it's a little bit different. Like in America, everything's very fast paced, very on top of it.
Mm-hmm.
Almost the whole country of America seems a little more type A than over here, whereas it's a little bit slower. People are a little bit
They're just
lax. It seems lax, but they're just doing it on their own time. Like
they're more
people
chill.
show up, yeah, they show up 10 minutes late to practice. It's a normal thing. You can't get mad at them because it's the culture. Whereas we're all there 30 minutes early. Like, where where is everyone?
Right.
Like, I remember I didn't have a car at first for my first couple of weeks here.
Mm-hmm.
And so I would just walk from my apartment 2 miles to training, and I'd get there like a half hour early, just be doing stuff. And all the girls would show up 5 minutes before training. They're like, "Wait, did you walk? How long have you been here?" And I'm like, "Of course I did. Like, how else was I supposed to get here?" Just kind of learning that they're just a little bit more relaxed.
Right. Right. Well, and is it even more relaxed out in your the new town now, where it's this tiny town where, maybe like everything is way more low key, or is it kind of the same in
I
regular?
think it's pretty similar
Okay.
throughout in my experience so far.
Okay. And you honestly, I didn't think of this when you first mentioned it, but what's the stadium like if you're in that small of a town? You've been in, you went to a Power Five, like Big 12
Yeah.
institution. You're used to some pretty legit facilities. What's the stadium like, even just in terms of like size, like general scale?
Yeah. Oh, I wish it was daylight so I could show you because you can see it from the kitchen where I'm
Oh,
sitting,
nice.
but it's very dark. So it's like the pitch is absolutely amazing. Like it's still turf, but
Nice.
to the back and one side, mountains. Like you just see mountains straight behind it.
That's
So
great.
pretty. And then they just built stands this past year. It
Uh-huh.
only has stands on one side, but then you kind of got to walk across a little bit of a field to get to it. But it's basically like going out to a park or any of the nice like turf high
Right.
school stadiums almost, I would say. A little bit
Nice.
more comparable to that. But I mean it's great. I
Well,
I enjoy it.
yeah. Well, and you've had two different stints over there. Obviously,
Mhm.
Fromm is in the second division, but in a bigger city. So it's kind of like, very different data points. And then now you're in the first division, but in a small town. Um,
Mhm.
what's like the fan support like, or even like, if you're I guess in that small town, maybe you're sort of a little bit occupy a little bit more of the conversation, but
Mhm.
what's it like? Because I know that when I've talked to players ranges so dramatically. Like sometimes
Yeah.
have they have way fewer fans than in college just because maybe there's a lot going on and it's hard to cut
Yeah.
through and whatever. But then maybe there's like five hardcore fans or something. What's the vibe been like in these different stops in terms of like fan support or even just like random stuff like that?
I would say last year especially was I would say it was pretty similar to our college games at least. And then this year, I mean, we've only had some preseason games, so there hasn't really been a
Yeah.
lot of fans out there, but the towns are all so supportive. Everywhere I went, even last year in Reykjavik, like people would there weren't a ton of tourists over here yet, so people would hear you talk and they'd be like, "Oh, like what are you doing here?" Be
Uh-huh.
like, "Oh, I'm playing football." And they'd say, "Where at?" And you'd say, "From," and they'd be like, "Oh, yeah, do you know so and so?" And so like everyone always knows someone on
Yeah.
every team. And then up here for sure it's since getting here I've learned it's a women's soccer town and a basketball town. So like everyone knows people on the team or
Right.
especially here since it's so small. There's only 5 Americans in the whole town, I think. So like once I got here, I was walking down the street trying to go to the bank, and then everyone's just head out the window staring at you, looking to see who's the new person.
They like
But the
looking
support's
at
great.
they're looking at you like you're wearing like a literal cowboy hat. Like, oh,
Yeah,
who's that American? Who's
yeah.
that girl over there?
And odds are pretty high they probably know my name, and I would have no idea after 2 days of being here.
So you mentioned there's a few Americans living there. Who are the other internationals who are on your team this year?
So there's 2 Americans, and one of them has been here. This is her 5th season. Her name
Uh,
is Muriel, and she played at Virginia Tech
okay.
and is from Virginia. And then Amber is from right outside San Diego and went to USD. And so she's in her 3rd season here. So I'm the newbie coming in this year.
Yeah. Nice. Well, that's cool.
Yeah.
And then is the basketball team, I'm assuming it's part of your same club, right? It's just the basketball
Yep.
team under that club.
Yes. So everything in this town is under one club. So
Yeah.
it's basically like youth sports here. If you're at like Lakeville, you have Lakeville Soccer Club, Lakeville Basketball, Lakeville this hockey, this, that, the other. It's similar here. So we have basketball and soccer, and we have track.
Yeah.
And I think that's it. Oh, skiing. I think
Yeah.
I was skiing too. But yeah.
Nice. Well, and only one last question, related to your Iceland, your dedicated Iceland Insta feed with all of the great content over there. A key staple of some of those pictures are when your family comes over and does the visit, and you have a younger sister who plays at Bemidji State.
Yes, I do.
I believe I'm getting that right. Is it Maggie?
Yep. Yes, Maggie.
So you are, a couple of soccer sisters, as we regularly highlight random sets of sisters on the show, but you all might be spread out enough that you didn't really play together, right?
I was a senior in high school when she was a freshman.
Oh, okay. Oh, you're closer than
So
I
yeah.
Yeah.
Yep. So we're 3 years, yes.
Nice. Well, and so I imagine now, because I think I first, honestly, this is sort of silly. I think the first time I became aware of you is when you liked some Bemidji State related tweets that Equal Time was doing. And
Yes. Okay.
I was like, wait a second, who is this? And that's how you first got on our radar. So are you tracking it? Are you giving tips? Are you like, how are you weighing in as like big sister?
I would never give tips unless I was asked to give tips about it. We know each other well enough for that. But I absolutely have loved, now that the roles are reversed, and like when I got home, I got to go to so many of her games and watch their historic run. Like I got to fly out to their quarterfinal game. I was out in Michigan, like watching them. And it was, my dad and I flew out, and it was just been so much fun to see her be so successful and be part of such a successful program with coaches that hold so firm to their values and just value all of their players. Like I couldn't be happier that my little sister's somewhere like that.
This is now I'm devastated. I wish I would have known you were going. We could have had you be an Equal Time correspondent on the ground. Mark had a broken ankle in the fall, and he covers all the SIC stuff. But for the conference championship game, we grew up near Bemidji, and so we drove up, visited our folks, and then I covered the game at the BSU stadium where it was just like snow, and all of these players were just rocking like no tights, no sleeves, maybe gloves. Like they were just these bonkers like warrior like princesses of just like Wonder Woman out there, just killing it. And I was
they're tough.
cold in my boots and snow pants, and I'm like, I'm too soft for this. They are much grittier than me. But that Michigan game was pretty wild. Just a historic run for them. Yeah, we're rocking the you right here for sure.
I definitely noticed that. Yep.
Yeah. This well, Hannah, this is so cool. And so, in general, if folks are trying to follow the club, I find it very interesting to try and figure out how to, keep track of when games are going on or how players are doing or watching games. Is there a way that is there a best piece of advice you can give followers of the show if they want to follow you over there? Is there any chance to maybe watch streams or even just track stats? What's the best thing for folks to do?
So there's a website called ksi.is that you can see everything about Iceland on it too. And after this, I'll for sure send you the Instagram link to like our club team and all that stuff.
Yeah.
But we're definitely trying to get streams up. But it was a little bit windy for one of our games, and the VO camera took a tumble from pretty high. So hopefully it's fixed before season starts in May.
That is real. That is real.
Yeah,
And so
the winds are no joke here.
I believe it. Well, and speaking of that, one thing that Annie Williams mentioned, I think maybe forever ago, like 3 appearances ago for her at this point, was when she was over there. There's a team that's out on an island. You know, Iceland is obviously
Yes.
an island, but then a small island where you take a ferry, a huge ferry ride, hours long
Yep.
ferry ride. And will you be making that trip, Hannah?
Potentially.
Okay.
We might play them in a cup game, but yeah.
If that happens, then I will get in touch with you. We will need to do some fairy related content. We will find
for sure.
we will find a way.
Definitely.
Well, that's great. Hannah, thank you so much for joining us. Hannah Cade, former all everything as a youth player in Minnesota, crushed it at Iowa State as a central midfielder, now playing overseas in her second stint in the Icelandic Pro Leagues. Thanks so much for joining us, Hannah.
Thank you again so much for having me.